Welcome to Messy Math Moments Matter. In this video, I will guide you through a sense-making activity where the focus is on understanding the idea first, before we attach numbers, rules, or procedures. This task builds a foundation that makes later strategies more meaningful. So what I'd like you to do is imagine that in this hand, I have some red Play-Doh. And then in this hand, I have some more red Play-Doh. Then I take the red Play-Doh from both hands and I smush it together. What I'd like you to do is take a moment to think about what is true about this smushed together red Play-Doh. Go ahead and pause the video. So what I know to be true is that it is the combination of this red Play-Doh and this red Play-Doh, so it is the total value of the red Play-Doh together. Awesome. So this time, in this hand, I have a little bit of red Play-Doh, and in this hand, I have lots of red Play-Doh. Again, I smush it together, and what do I know to be true about the Play-Doh I have now? Well, I know that I have more red Play-Doh than I started with here. Individually, I have a little bit here and a lot here, and I have all of that together. What if I start with lots of red Play-Doh here and have a little bit of red Play-Doh here, and I smush it all together? What do you know to be true now? Well, again, I know it's true that I will have the total amount that I started with joined together. What if I have a small amount of red Play-Doh here, and I have the same amount of red Play-Doh here, and I smush it together? What do I know to be true now? Well, I know that this amount here is double what I started with from here, or what I started with from here. So I have double the amount. Now I start with some blue Play-Doh. So I've got some blue Play-Doh here, and I have more blue Play-Doh here. What do I know to be true when I smush that together? Well, I know I have more blue Play-Doh than here and here individually. What if I start with lots of blue Play-Doh here and just a little bit of blue Play-Doh here, and I smush it together? Well, I know that I have more blue Play-Doh than just here and just here. What do I know to be true if I start with some amount of blue Play-Doh here and the same amount of blue Play-Doh here, and I smush it together? Well, again, this blue Play-Doh will be double what I had here and here, and putting it together. So this time, I start with a bunch of red Play-Doh, and I'm going to remove some of the red Play-Doh and throw it away. What do I know to be true about what I have here? Well, I know I have less Play-Doh than I started with because I removed a little bit. What if I have lots of blue Play-Doh and I remove just a little bit of blue Play-Doh and throw it away? What do I know to be true about my blue Play-Doh? Well, I have less blue Play-Doh than I started with. If I have a red Play-Doh and I remove lots of the red Play-Doh, what do I know to be true about my red Play-Doh now? Well, I probably have just a little bit of red Play-Doh left. What if I start with blue Play-Doh and I remove lots of the blue Play-Doh? What do I know to be true about what I have left? Well, I probably have a little bit left. So when I think about that red Play-Doh, how would I know if more than half is left when I remove some of the red Play-Doh? Exactly half is left when I remove some red Play-Doh, or less than half is left when I remove some red Play-Doh. Well, if I remove more than half of the red Play-Doh, I'll have less than half of the red Play-Doh left. If I remove less than half of the red Play-Doh, I'll have more than half of the red Play-Doh left. And if I remove exactly half of the red Play-Doh, I will have exactly half of the red Play-Doh left. So now I'm going to ask you to suspend some of your mathematical thinking here for a moment. I want you to think about red Play-Doh, and I want you to think about the blue Play-Doh, and I would like you to picture it all mushed together. What would you end up with if you took red Play-Doh and blue Play-Doh and mushed it together? Well, you end up with purple Play-Doh. So as you're thinking about the color purple, I want you to think about the rainbow, and I want you to think about a particular color in the rainbow that is there, but we can't see it when we just look at it. That's ultraviolet. So we are going to suspend our thinking for a moment, like I said, and we are going to imagine that if I take red Play-Doh and an equal amount of blue Play-Doh and mush it together, it's going to create purple, but we're going to pretend it's ultraviolet purple, which we can't see without using other tools. So as soon as we take red Play-Doh and an equal amount of blue Play-Doh, mush it together, it becomes ultraviolet and we can't see it anymore. It's still there. It exists. We just can't see it. So I want you to imagine taking a chunk of ultraviolet. We're going to use a tool. We're going to separate it out into its individual colors of red Play-Doh and blue Play-Doh. And what do you know to be true about the amounts of this red Play-Doh and the amount of this blue Play-Doh? Well, they're equal because it takes equal amounts of red and blue to create ultraviolet. So I reach into the rainbow and I pull out a little bit of ultraviolet and I separate it. What do I know to be true? Well, I have a little bit of red Play-Doh and the same amount of blue Play-Doh separated. If I reach into the rainbow and I pull out this big chunk of ultraviolet and I separate it, what do I know to be true? Well, the big chunk of red and I'll have the same amount of a chunk of blue Play-Doh, and I can work with that. So now what I want you to think about is if I take a big chunk of red Play-Doh to start with, and a small chunk of blue Play-Doh, and I mush it together, what will I have? Pause the video while you think about that one. Well, if I have this big chunk of red Play-Doh and this little chunk of blue Play-Doh, if I take the same amount of that red Play-Doh over here with the blue and I mush it together, that becomes ultraviolet and I can't see it anymore. So what do I have left? Well, I can't see the ultraviolet, but I can see all of this red Play-Doh that was left over after I pulled out the chunk I needed to make the ultraviolet. So I have lots of red Play-Doh left. So this time I want you to think about a big chunk of blue Play-Doh and a little chunk of red Play-Doh. What happens? What will I end up with next? Go ahead and pause the video as you think about that one. So I have this big chunk of blue Play-Doh and this little chunk of red Play-Doh. So I'm going to pull out the little bit of blue I need to make ultraviolet, and that disappears. And I've got all of this blue Play-Doh left. What do I know to be true about the amount of the blue Play-Doh that I have left? Well, it'll be a little bit less than the amount of blue I started with because I had to pull out a chunk of it to make the ultraviolet with the red. So this time I have a chunk of blue Play-Doh and I want to remove some red Play-Doh. What will I have left? Take a moment, pause the video to think about that. So I've got this chunk of blue Play-Doh and I need to remove some red, but I don't actually have any red. So where's that red going to come from? Well, let's reach into the rainbow and pull out some ultraviolet, enough so that I can pull out some red. Then I separate that into its red and its blue. And now I've got this big chunk of blue, and I've got this blue and the red amount that I got from the ultraviolet. So now I can remove the red that I wanted to remove, and And I've got that big chunk I started with of blue, and I've got that little bit amount of blue that I had left over when I took apart my ultraviolet. So now I put that together and I've got this bigger chunk of blue. So this time I have a chunk of red and I want to remove some blue from it. Go ahead, pause the video and see if you can figure out what I'll be left with in terms of Play-Doh. So I have this chunk of red, and in order to remove some blue, I need to have some blue here. So just put that red to the side for a moment. Let's pull out some ultraviolet. We'll separate it into my blue and my red. So I have just enough blue to pull out what I need. So I've got the chunk of red I started with, then I've got the red and the blue from the ultraviolet. So now I remove my blue, and I've got a chunk of red and the chunk of red, and I put that together, and I have a bigger chunk of red. So this is the handout that you'll have access to. And you'll notice that I didn't print this in color, so I have no way to represent red Play-Doh versus blue Play-Doh. So I use the plus symbol and the minus symbol to help you kind of figure out if I'm referencing red or blue. You get to decide if you want the plus symbol to represent red or the plus symbol to represent blue, and then your negative symbol would be the opposite of that. So you are going to start by doing the first draft on your own. And if you want to use red and blue pencil crayons, feel free to do so, but just in pencils, just fine. So when you do the first question, you can see that I've got a small amount of Play-Doh, which I'm joining with a little bit bigger Play-Doh. So you're going to represent your final result after you smush it all together. And the circle doesn't need to be to scale. It just needs to be obviously bigger or obviously smaller, depending on what the result is. And you need to show the plus sign in this case to indicate if it matches the same color, or the negative sign if it's the other color. So hopefully that made sense. Go ahead and do each of those questions. There are 4 sets of 3 questions in there. When you are done, you are going to find someone else in the room who's not sitting with you, and you are going to work on your second draft. So in your second draft, what you will do is take out a different color of writing stick. So if you used pencil, use pen. If you use red and blue pencil crayons, then use a pen or a pencil, something other than what you started with. Because in mathematics, it's important that we do multiple drafts of our thinking. So you're going to have a conversation with your partner, and if you change your thinking from when you did it on your own to after your conversation, you'll use that second color or that additional color of a writing stick to show your new thinking. So you're not attempting to get rid of your old thinking, because that's what drafts are all about, is showing that progression of your thinking on your own and then chatting with other people. So when you're done, if your thinking has changed, I should see your original draft and your new draft all together. Hopefully you found this helpful, and we'll see you in the next video.